You are listening to Hit Play, Not Pause, a Feisty Menopause podcast for active, performance-minded women. I am your host, Selene Yeager. Each week, I bring you advice from athletes, scientists, researchers, and other experts to help you feel and perform your best, no matter what your hormones are doing. This show is a production of Live Feisty Media. Hello, strong, feisty women. I hope you all are well. So, believe it or not, and it's pretty hard to believe, we just passed our 4-year anniversary, and this is our 200th episode. So, to celebrate, like we did with our 100th episode, my producer, Carrie Barrett, and I sat down and we just had a conversation. We talked about how the show has evolved, some of our and your favorite topics, how our own thinking has changed and evolved on key issues like hormone therapy and more. And it was just like really fun to sit down and talk about all of the things that we have learned and taken away and what we hope you're learning and taking away over these 4 years and going into, I don't know, the next four, because sometimes people ask how long that I'll be here behind the microphone talking about menopause. And I obviously can't give precise answers to that, but I have no plans of going anywhere anytime soon. This conversation and the science around menopause and hormone therapy is just getting cooking. So I have every intention of standing over the stove and dishing out information for active women in and beyond menopause for the foreseeable future. I love the work and I see the difference it's making in women's lives. And I just appreciate you all for being along with me for the ride. All right. Before we get to it, give us a follow at Feisty Menopause on Instagram and Facebook. Sign up for my free weekly 40 plus newsletter. You'll find a link to that in the show notes to make it super easy. And come join us in Lake Nona for our Feisty Menopause Performance Retreat next month. That is in the show notes too. Thank you, as always, for your kind reviews and 5-star ratings. It means a lot as we go into our 5th year and hope to bring you even bigger and better guests. And a super quick thanks to MIDI Health for their continued support of the show. I have heard from so many of you that you have had life-changing appointments with MIDI, and that is music to my ears. So thank you, MIDI, for your support. And with that, enough of me. Let's have a few words about our awesome sponsors and get on with the show. Okay, Carrie Barrett, welcome to the show. It is episode 200.
Unbelievable, Celine. And as your producer, I just want to, put a little director's cut in here and just say, let's take a beat. Like you and I are just churning, you especially. But I feel like these weeks and months and years now have gone by where I don't even know what show we had last week because we're just always working on the next one. So with that being said, I just want to like raise my little teacup to you and celebration of 200 episodes.
Clink, thank you.
Yeah. And just take a beat, just realize that you've been at this for over 4 years and we've been at this for
I
over
can't
4 years
believe it.
together.
Like it's
Yeah.
hard. It is hard to wrap my head around that. It's gone very quickly.
I mean, that's like a college or like
Oh, stop! Oh
I
my
think about
God,
my
when you
four
put it
years
like
of high
that.
school. Yeah. I think about 4 years of high school. I think about 4 years of college. Like we basically started as freshmen and
Yeah,
now
that's a great analogy in many ways. So I'm gonna tell you
we're
what, it actually
well,
is.
yeah, well, but sadly we're nowhere near graduating because I don't think we'll ever
I'm much
know. Like
wiser though. I mean, there is that's funny. There is a little bit of truth to that. Like when I waded into these waters, I knew a fair amount. I was working on that book, Next Level, with Dr. Stacy Sims, but there are times that I look back and I'm like, wow, like I knew a lot, but I know so much more now.
yeah, well, I definitely want to get into some of that today
Yeah.
with you and just do a recap with where we started and where we've come in these last 4 years. But again, as your producer, I also like to give little facts and anecdotes and just little tidbits of information that I find compelling, that our audience might find compelling. And it's things like, well, how many people actually listen to your show? Are we just screaming into the
Details.
void?
Yeah, believe me, I sit in my little office in Pennsylvania and I'm like, I guess, I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, occasionally you get some feedback, and
Yeah.
you're only as good as like your last screw up, basically. So oftentimes you only hear about the times that you've offended somebody. But let me tell you, the stats don't lie here, and I can say that since we first started this podcast, Hit Play Not Pause has close to 3 million downloads since we began in
Wow.
the now 200
2020.
episodes. Yeah,
Hmm.
since 2020. And that's a lot of lives affected, and that's a lot of impressions that have been made on people. And I think about that butterfly effect of,
Mm.
you've put these messages into the world, but now your legion of listeners are screaming from the rooftops too about it. And
It's
so
cool and it's real.
it is very real. As you put in the Slack channel today, Samantha Bee, the comic, is getting ready to do a show in New York, a whole one woman comedy special in New York about menopause. And who knew,
Yeah.
who knew that it would have this effect? And I can also stand here or sit here and assure you that this is very global as well, because of the 195 countries on the planet that we know of, uh, I have listeners in 119 of them, which is
That's
pretty cool.
bananas. Yeah, I was surprised when you sent that to me earlier. I was like, it's a lot of countries.
It is a lot of countries, and some of them are countries that I didn't expect. So, our top 10, many are what you would expect just by way of population of those countries. So, top 10, of course, the United States, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, the UK, Germany, Spain, Ireland. Here was one that got me: Hong Kong. Hong Kong
Very,
is in the top 10.
I was surprised to see that come into the top 10. Yep.
Yeah, yeah. France rounds out that top 10, but Belgium, Turkey, Sweden, Indonesia, Serbia, Costa Rica, you know, I,
We
I,
see that though. We see it in the, I'm always surprised, like when we'd have those online summits or even in the group, like I will see women who are like, oh, I'm in Portugal or oh, I'm in Jordan. I'm like, okay, like,
yeah.
like it's very cool.
Yeah, and I do encourage anyone who is in one of these countries that isn't in the top 10 of it, let us know. Like,
Yeah.
post something in the Facebook group, or shoot us an email, or just get in touch so that we know that people are out there. And if there are specific topics that apply to you and your current situation, certainly do put that in the notes as well, because this is how we know what the audience wants. And doing my research and looking up the catalog and the history and the data, uh, it's becoming clear what topics resonate most with people. And before we get into some of those popular shows and popular topics, Selene, when you started this, did you have any idea what was going to resonate with people?
I mean, I did be in a way, because I was talking to a very specific audience that was in the same boat as myself, that nobody else was really talking to, right? So out of the gate, my thought was I need to speak to active athletic women, who are going through this really pivotal transition, which I was really only beginning to understand myself as I was, working on the podcast and working on the books and doing all the things. And then just speaking to them like, you're already exercising, like here, here's what's happening to you, here's what's happening to your performance, here is why. And I knew that would land. Like I knew that they would understand, that would be because we don't know. Like we didn't know. A lot of people still don't know how estrogen is an anabolic hormone. So it helps with your muscle and your strength and your power. All that kind of stuff. Anxiety and fear. Like all of a sudden you're on a Black Diamond mountain bike trail and that you've ridden 12,000 times and you have to walk down it. I mean, that kind of stuff, like I knew that would land because women were very hungry for that information. I would be lying if I said I thought that I knew how big it would be, it like there was a tidal wave of people that came in as soon as we opened the door. But I did know that those things would land. The stuff that I have sort of like evolved with over time is more sort of the hormone therapy conversation because that conversation itself has been evolving since we started the show. And at the time, I appreciated it as like a safe, effective tool, which is kind of still how I think about it. But as I've come more into it, I have come to believe and appreciate that it is too few women are getting offered it and too few women are still probably using it who could really use it. And I didn't have
Yeah.
that perspective 4 years ago.
Yeah, yeah. And I I also know that when we first started the show and I was just getting to know you a little bit and we were uh talking about early episodes and things, I didn't know that estrogen was this almighty powerful hormone that was responsible for literally everything, as it turns out. And I just remember you telling me that. And at the time I was 47, and which again seems like so long ago. And I hadn't started what I would consider the transition at that point, firmly in it now. But I just remember you saying, oh, this conversation, this topic is so monumental, to the point where when you give talks, and you gave one, at least that I have
Mm.
witnessed, at Endurance Exchange a couple of years ago, that you start the talk essentially with like, here are the 36, I'm making up a number in my head, but the just myriad symptoms
Yep.
that all could be attributed to decline in estrogen in a female athlete.
Yeah, and and progesterone as well. Estrogen is the star of the show, and progesterone is sort of the buddy cop there that gets not as enough attention, in my opinion. But yes, I mean that's why I start that whenever I give that talk, I start by saying like, here's all the things that estrogen does, and like on your all your organ systems, which is all of your organ systems, and progesterone, and then I show that graph that shows what happens in perimenopause, where they all just start like swinging and declining and spiking. And it's like, and that's why you feel all of these things, and I've seen like the lists are getting ludicrous at this point. I've seen one that's like 100. I'm like, I don't know. But I mean, it's
Yeah.
definitely in the dozens, right? I mean, a hundred
Yeah.
percent. And I do think that saying, the more people think about it like puberty in reverse, the better I think it is because everybody can kind of wrap their head around that. Like when these hormones come like bursting through the door in your life, you know something is going on, right? Like
Yes.
you're sprouting
Yes.
breasts and hips and like all kinds of moods and you're crying and you're euphoric and and then you have your menstrual cycle and we make all these connections throughout our life. Pregnancy, for God's sakes, like that's a huge hormonal shift that has profound effects. But then somehow we get to this other part of our life and people are like, oh, like
Yeah.
they've never thought to talk about it like that. And I'm like,
Yes. Yes. Or we think of it as a sign of weakness, as a sign. I mean, certainly it is a sign of aging, because guess what?
it's
That is what it
coinciding with
is.
it, yeah,
Yes.
with a point in your life. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And so it should come as no surprise to any of us that, as far as the topics and the episodes that have landed well with the audience, are pretty much all of the episodes on hormone replacement therapies. And you've covered it, I don't know, at least half a dozen times
Yeah.
in
Yeah,
your.
that's fair. That's fair. I mean, it comes up a lot, but I've done I think probably a half a dozen dedicated shows to it. And I do them when there's something that I feel is notable to say.
Yeah. And I'll tell you what, just as again, somebody who within these 4 years has started the transition, like wasn't in the transition when we started and now
Yeah.
firmly am. It's amazing what my brain does when I'm listening to these episodes because what is it, that very famous Bruce Lee quote, which is something to the effect of take what is useful and leave the rest.
Yeah.
And there was a time where I would hear these episodes and I can even remember early on when you did the Estrogen Matters
Yeah.
podcast episode. And I listened and I edited and I took it, but I wasn't hearing it.
Yep.
I wasn't paying attention because at the time it didn't apply to me.
Yep. And
Sure as
that's a
shit
very
applies to me now.
reasonable. Yeah, but
Yeah.
that's I think that's such a reasonable response. Whenever someone's like, "Oh, young women should be," I'll be listening to that. I'm like, maybe. I mean, I wouldn't have wanted it when I was before I was entering this transition. And I think it's good to know. I 100% do think it's good to know like all these things. So like when you do have that 2 o'clock in the morning anxiety, you don't think you're losing your mind. You understand it's hormonal. Like I do think that's important. But I also just don't think you need to be like immersed in this whole journey to I just don't think it's necessary. Like it's there for you when you are ready.
Yeah. Yeah. Did that surprise you when I pulled that data that the HRT shows and
Oh God, no.
episodes?
No,
No.
I mean
Yeah.
because women are really there's so much confusion and noise that I think anytime that they see that it's a they're hungry for it because they just want to hear and I'm hoping that they do get some clarity. I mean I obviously and I'm very clear about that we don't have all the answers, but I really really try to break it down in a lower temperature, not histrionic way, like this is what the research is showing. This is what the guidelines say. This is why sometimes it seems like they're disagreeing. Here is the mess of research and why it is so messy. And then just really try to because it is, it is a very powerful tool and it's very important. And we're going to discover, the populations for whom it really is probably essential, in some
Mm.
ways, because it can help with uh if you have certain just like risk factors. I think the brain health is going to be really interesting to see the women who, have genetic predispositions and what it's going to look like. But women just deserve like the whole suite of information because they're intelligent, right? So you give it to them, you break it down as best you can, and then I think they just leave feeling a little more confident in what their own decisions are or what decisions they need to make for themselves. So it doesn't surprise me that those shows are as popular as they are because we're still learning so much and there's still so much new noise and confusion among out there in the social media world, which is where most people are getting their information.
Right. And I can say now that one of the things that I'm working on are creating little playlists, like various playlists
Mm,
for the broad topics that you've covered. And so if hormone replacement therapy is something that you are wanting to learn more about right now, you just happen to be in the
yeah,
cycle of wanting more information on that, we will have little playlists that are dedicated to those episodes.
that's cool.
And if you are interested in uh, weightlifting and lifting heavy shit, we'll have the episodes that you've dedicated to strength training on a playlist, and so on and so forth. Because, yeah, everyone is coming at it with different needs, different interests. And that's what I love about the show is that one week you might have a sleep specialist on, and the next week we're talking about journaling our feelings,
Yeah,
and and because it's all important. It's all so
yeah.
important.
And I've
And
also really enjoyed, oh, I'm sorry. I've also really enjoyed the athletes who have come on and just shared their stories because that's really important too. It's really important that you have, especially like high profile. I mean, I talk to everybody, but I'm really, really appreciative of the Rebecca Rushes and the Myrna Valerios and, Mel McQuaid and all these women who, at the time it was a little bit of bravery to step out and talk about being in menopause, especially as a professional athlete, where that can be viewed as perhaps a weakness or something like that. So I'm really appreciative of those episodes too. And those have done quite well too, the Leah Goldsteins and the inspirational stories.
yes, and of course, like I'm highlighting some of the topics that have bubbled up,
Yeah,
but
yeah, I get it.
absolutely, yeah.
The
And
listenership's pretty consistent, which is kind of cool to see too.
definitely. And other topics, of course, that should come as no surprise that rise to the top
I know
of
what you're gonna say.
people's players is all things weight and body
Yep,
composition.
yep. Not
And
surprising.
not surprising
I
at
I
all.
I talk about that because you can't not.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
it's always a sensitive topic for me because diet culture, and we've all grown up with diet culture, and I'm not a fan of it. But women, I understand and I respect that, it is a concern. It's something that affects everybody, and we're not helpless against it. But at the same time, it's really important for me to make it clear that nobody has the answer to this, and bodies change, and our bodies are going to change, and that's okay too. Your bodies can still do really great things, and just to sort of that element just opens the door to a lot of predatory behavior, that we all have been a product
Hmm.
of with diet culture, and I'm very sensitive to that.
Yeah, and I have a complicated personal relationship with it as well. So I'm always interested in those shows.
Yeah.
And there's always, I grew up overweight and not active. I was active. I was an athlete. I did like the ball sports. I was the field hockey player like you. I played basketball, but I wasn't a fit runner. I wasn't lean at all growing up. But when I became an adult, it sort of cleaned up my personal habits and prioritized fitness and prioritized fueling my body with uh, foods that are good for me, foods that nourish me. I changed. So my body composition changed and I got into triathlon, blah, 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 blah. But so I'm always I am always, Celine, in fear of regressing.
Mm.
And so I'm always in fear of turning back into the 17-year-old Carrie who
That never
just
leaves. Yeah.
that
No, that
she
that that
never
never
goes
leaves.
away.
Hmm.
Yeah. And so whenever I talk about how I and you and I were just talking about this the other day when we were discussing the show and how we say like I'm like I'm on that cliff. I'm just waiting to fall off that cliff. And it makes me so angry because at myself because I'm like why am I just waiting? Like why am I so fearful? And I think that that's it. I just think that I'm always, one piece of toast away from just going off the
Yeah.
rails. And I know rationally that that
Right.
is absolutely not true, but that is why these shows, specifically, there was one that you actually named, what you need to know about weight in menopause and beyond. You've had stuff that are like, less fuel, more problems, why menopausal athletes need to eat more. So I've had to shift, as many of us have, as you alluded to, I've had to shift my paradigm and
Hmm.
actually talk to myself about like why I do need to feel more. Like it's this deprivation BS has to
Tell me you
stop.
don't feel better when you
I do I do, but there will all there's just like an element of oh my God, I feel like there's guilt. There is, I mean, there's a lot of guilt involved in it and fear. And
No, I know
I
you're
know
not
that,
alone.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Um,
But
and that didn't mean that for this to turn into a therapy
no, no, no. I
session
mean, but
with
they
Celine.
are very, I mean, this is the weight stuff is real, and it's the
Yeah.
number one thing that women come in and are concerned about and feel sad about. And I wish I had all the answers, but I don't, and nobody does. But
Mm-mm.
there are, like I said, there are tools, and that's
Mhm.
all we can provide, and also just community and understanding. And I think that goes a long way too.
Definitely,
But
definitely.
like
And I have
focusing on
heard,
what your body can do, 100%. I mean, I think like, and we do perform better when we're fueled. Like that's fact.
Yes, I just have to nail it on race day. That seems to be my problem.
Well,
Is
that's a whole
not,
other set of problems.
yeah, exactly, exactly. So yeah, thank you for that. But I will to anyone who is out there struggling with any sort of dysmorphia around your body or with around food or eating, like I see you, we see you. Selene definitely sees you because there have been a whole host of episodes
Yeah.
around that topic. And as you've said so many times, we're not test tubes. We're not test. So
Yeah.
what works for me isn't going to work for everyone. And so we are all an experiment of one. And so I've had to uh, just really work on my self-esteem because my eating is great. Like my eating is fine. I feel good about how I eat and what I eat and how much I eat. Um, it's my self-esteem that
Hmm.
I'm working on now. And so another topic of shows that has been really popular amongst our listeners are these episodes around mindset
Yeah.
and around finding joy in this transition and finding new purpose or new meaning. What say you about those shows?
I love those shows. And I think that that is an unsung benefit of menopause that I talk about all the time. Like, I think that when you talk to, and this comes up even at the big conferences, like the undercurrent of that of what happens with women as they go through this transition is you hear it all the time. They stop caring as much what other people think. They start sort of stepping into their own power, and it's you can really have this very powerful mindset change, and that said, you're still bringing some of your baggage with you, right? So, I mean, a lot of these shows are sort of how to let go of all of that on stuff, like let go of the stories that you've just absorbed that aren't even yours. We've all absorbed all this stuff, especially about menopause and about aging women and about older women. That we did. This isn't from us. This is from like some bullshit cultural stuff that isn't even around anymore. Like a
Mhm.
lot of it. Like we can just let it all go. And I have found those shows transformational. And I hear from others who have found those shows transformational. And that you also it's okay to evolve as an athlete. Like I don't chase podiums the same way that I did. I mean, even up to around 50, I was chasing podiums pretty much. And then at some point, I'm like, all right, I've kind of done that, and it's still fun to step on a box here and there, but there were other challenges I wanted to pursue and other ways I wanted to express myself athletically and challenge myself that way. And that's okay too. Like all of this is
Yes.
just like, and I think that sometimes we can get stuck, and one of the benefits of hearing shows like that is a little crack opens up in your mind, and you're like, oh, huh. Yeah, I haven't been so happy with X, Y, or Z, and maybe that's a way I can think about it now, or maybe that's something I can try. And I think those shows can have a lot of power.
Definitely. They've certainly transformed my life and have helped me gain perspective
Yeah.
on this time of life and not see it as loss, but see it as truly what are going to be the best years of my life for sure. Now that the fear of competition and the just this drive to get faster, strong, whatever it is, like, oh, it's exhausting.
It's
It's
exhausting. It all
exhausting.
serves a purpose. I
Exhausting.
have no regret of those times, but also then it's like, okay.
Yes.
You can close a chapter on something that you did and was great and whatever, and then open another chapter, and that's
Yeah.
okay too.
Yeah. Yeah. And before I start sort of rapid firing questions at you
Mm.
about your experience on the show, I just want to close out that some of the other popular topics and those that maybe I hadn't even considered prior to starting this journey were things like sleep
Well,
and better brain health. I think that there's so much uh, research, and I think what I'm astounded at is the implications that this transition, this menopausal transition, the implications that it could potentially have on heart health, on brain health. on insulin resistance. Like these are truly things that I had zero idea that could be affected in this
Oh
time of
yeah.
life. I had no
Yeah,
idea.
and that's what, one of my take homes from the show has been is that it is a time to take stock. I mean, I think that sometimes women can become fearful because they hear this and they think that it's a foregone conclusion, and it's not a foregone conclusion for everybody, right? Like not everybody is going to get osteoporosis. Not everybody is going to get, these kinds of heart diseases. But, all that said, that when your hormones change, a lot of these risks do go up, and it's a good idea to like go in and see what your bones look like, and go in and see what your do a blood panel, do all that kind of stuff, and just see where you are. And if you are having symptoms or you have stuff that you're concerned about, then there's all kinds of therapies available to you. And certainly menopausal hormone therapy is a big tool in the box that can be very, very helpful. But yeah, I mean, it's
Hmm.
just really just going in clear-eyed and being like, okay, these are the hormones have been doing these things for me. And now, even if you're on hormone therapy, like you still need to step in because it's interesting when I go to the conferences, it's like estradiol is now the star of the sun, the show. It's like the sun in our sky. And a lot of the researchers are like, let's hold on a minute. Like, there's a lot of hormones. And yes, estrogen is important, but we're also discovering, all these other hormones that work in the orchestra have a role too. And it's just this thing that we as humans tend to do. It's good, like, this is the one thing, and it's never the one thing. It's never, ever, ever the one thing.
If
So you still have to sort of step in and do the work that your physiology is changing, and you adapt to that, regardless of what you do with hormones or other therapies.
yeah, I'm sitting here like mouth agape because I just had a aha Oprah moment. And if there's any takeaway that anyone should have from this, it's that it's never just one thing. Like there's no
Never,
just one solution.
never.
And I think we're always just looking for that one solution to all of our problems, to
Yeah,
all
I
of
mean,
our ails.
I do think that there are big dominoes or big doors or like whatever the metaphor you want, right? There are like, like the big things. If you check that, it will have a knock-on effect that'll take care of a lot of other things. I mean, I do believe in that. Like taking care of your sleep. If you're having raging night sweats that are keeping you up and then contributing to brain fog and mood and all that stuff, and you take hormone therapy and that goes away and everything gets better, great. Like that is a maybe a one-stop shop. But you still need to like exercise and eat well and do all that other stuff too. Yeah,
Right, right. So, a few questions for you that I framed
sure.
up that I think the audience would benefit from knowing just to get to know you a little bit more and where you're at, your headspace when you're planning these shows. And so, over the last 4 years, how has the show changed? And not necessarily just from a formatting perspective, but are you seeking different guests? Are you exploring different topics from what you ever anticipated?
Mm, I don't, that's a hard question to answer. I mean, because when I started the show in 2020, it was funny. I was telling my friends, I had worked at Bicycling Magazine for like 27 years, writing their fitness and training stuff. And I was actively sort of departing that and segueing into doing this work. And a lot of people were like, what are you going to talk about for more than, they didn't understand like that I could do more than 5 episodes on something like this. And I was like, I have told people how to ride their bicycle and eat to ride for 27 years. I am confident that I am going to be able to have many things to say about this giant transitionary period in a woman's life. So, I mean, I guess when I stepped into it, I knew that there would be plenty to talk about because science evolves, and I was just going to I was just going to ride the science wherever it took. So I don't know. I mean, I guess if I didn't anticipate, to go back to what you were saying a few minutes ago, I didn't anticipate talking about brain health that way because I didn't know about that when I started it. I didn't know the brain physically changed during perimenopause, like literally, the structure and how it uses energy is changing and then it adapts and all that. I had no idea. Like I didn't conceive doing shows like that. Um, and that's exciting. It's exciting. I didn't think I'd be talking about creatine so much, like there's all that kind of stuff that just comes along and you dig into it and you're like, oh, there's something there. So yeah, the show has evolved in that way. The general way that I do it has not really changed because I kind of think of, and you'll appreciate this because you do DJ kind of stuff, but I've always thought of it as sort of a DJ where I am trying to give an array of interesting topics and perspectives from different places, and there's a rhythm to it. So I don't want to follow like a heavy science show with another heavy science show. I want to follow a research show with like a hip hop dance, these people who are doing this, and follow that by maybe one of those more mental introspective kind of shows, and then follow that with something. So I like it to have that kind of a rhythm to it because I just think it's like a dance.
I so appreciate that metaphor. I hadn't thought of it that way, but that is absolutely what's happening.
Yeah.
And you're right. It's like reading the room and knowing what the people want to hear next.
Yep.
And you do come off of some heavy topics and some very sciency discussions. And yeah, it's like, and now we're going to talk about dragon boat racing,
Yeah, totally.
which is
Exactly.
freaking awesome. Yeah,
Yeah.
which is freaking awesome. And you're right, it just rides that wave. I hadn't thought of it that way before. And
That's intentional.
yeah, and I
Mhm.
can totally attest to the fact that you might send me a lineup that is 3 months long of, okay, here are the shows for the next 12 weeks. And it'll change because you will respond to feedback or you will shuffle some things around.
Something becomes more important in the
Yes.
zeitgeist.
Yes. So there is so much thought that goes behind the cadence of the episodes that we're not just like throwing them out
Right, I'm
there
not just doing it week by week,
willy-nilly.
willy-nilly. Like, who
Yeah.
can I get on this week? That's not really the way it goes.
Yeah, and again, I can attest that a lot of shows are like that.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, tomorrow's release date. Do you want to come on tonight?
Yeah.
Um, so how has the show changed you? And I get the backstage look at the good, the bad, and the ugly sometimes of how it affects you and how it inspires you. I've sort of seen all of the Celenes at various times. And how has it changed you?
Yeah, I didn't think I could become more empathetic, but the show has, because I am a walking empath. I mean, it's just how I am. But I have become even more empathetic because every single woman is on their own journey with this, and it looks different for everyone, and it can be frustrating. So I really understand, there's sometimes the room gets heated, in the Hit Play Not Pause group, and it can be easy to look at that and be like, oh my God, just stop, but I understand when people are letting out their frustrations, especially on social media, because it's like a universal outlet, right, for frustration.
Yes, yes, yes.
And and that's okay. So I am sort of like I'm empathetic with people and I'm patient with people. I'm more patient with people because I'm like, I get it, and I'm going to give you all the grace in the world. So that's been a really positive sort of effect. Um, I have often or also become braver. Braver's a
Mm,
word, maybe less
mm.
afraid for sure of like aging in general. You know, I used to look at 60, like let's just say 60, and be like, shit, so like sort of like this, like, I don't know, this door, that just would stop me from doing things, or just sort of the end of some line, and be like, oh, I better get all this stuff done before I turn 60 because I don't know, because then what? And by doing this show, and we have a lot of people in their 60s in the show, in the community, and even in their 70s, and they are track racing and rock climbing and riding across the country, like doing all kinds of stuff. And I'm just like, oh, okay, like, so that's another one of those things where we have all these cultural stories, and I have all these cultural stories that I absorbed growing up that are built on nothing. They're built on, so
Yes,
it's just
yes.
been like really cool to sort of let that go because it just instead of and I always say this like I believe in living forward and not looking over your shoulder at like the rear view mirror of what you used to be. And it's really given me even more conviction and strength in doing that and just like living forward instead of being like, oh, in the old days or back in the day, like you have so many days ahead of you and they're good. You don't have to be afraid of them.
Yeah, and I love how last year you stepped back into triathlon after
15
um,
years.
15 year, was it 15 years? I forgot how
15
many
years.
years, like a 15-year hiatus, and you stepped back in a big way. You did a 70.3, and that's a big deal.
Yeah,
That's
it was
brave.
it was funny. I mean, I because after Ironman, after Kona, I was just like, whoo, well, I got picked up by a that mountain bike racing team too. So, and that's where my heart always was. So I did that, but it's just like Ironman cured me of triathlon for quite a long time. And then then the Happy Valley, because I'm a Penn State grad, and when I saw that they were finishing on the 50-yard line of Beaver Stadium, which is a giant football stadium that holds 100,000 people, and it was going to be in the hills, and I like riding hills, I was like, okay, okay, and it was point to point. That was exciting. So I hired Marty Sumball, the coach.
Mm.
I will say, I felt amazing. It was really fun to train for that again. I do not miss that much running on the road, though. That was the thing. When I got to the run, I was like, "Oh, this. Okay, we can
Yeah,
do it.
yeah.
We can do it." But
Which
yeah,
is so funny because I'm like, I'm the runner. Like
yeah.
I'm just like, oh, more pavement, please. More, more miles. Just get me out of that water for
It was
crying
fun to
out
get back
loud.
into the open water swimming. I wish I lived closer to a big body of water because I do love. I hate swimming in the pool with the strength of seven suns. I just don't like it. But I love open water swimming. So I wish I lived a little closer. It's like 40 minutes away, which is
Oh
just a
yeah,
little far to
that's
drive.
yeah, yeah. No, that's inconvenient. But I will say, unsolicited, completely off subject. If our triathletes in the audience, if you're looking for a 70.3 to do, last month I just did the inaugural Tri Cities 70.3 in Washington State. And it was a great race. And
Yeah.
it was a down current swim. So I
Oh,
swam
those are
like a
so fun.
24-minute,
That's
1.2
so
mile,
fun.
which was like 15 minutes faster than I would normally swim it. So it was really, really fun. So that was completely unsolicited and off the cuff. But if our triathletes are looking for a good, well-supported race with a fair amount of climbing and then really nice scenery, I recommend that one.
Cool.
Um, so you are an eternal optimist. You have said that before. I have seen that. I can attest to that. You are an eternal optimist. And yet you have to take in a lot of energy from people who are in various stages of grief in their
Mm-hmm.
transition, in
Mm-hmm.
various stages of anger, confusion.
Mm-hmm.
And so my question to you is, how do you protect your own energy in all of this?
Long ass bike rides on the weekends.
I should have known. I should have known.
Yeah. Like, I mean, I mean, I can feel my brain airing out and getting lighter, when I'm out for about 3 or 4 or more hours on my bike and just like really just not thinking about anything. But that is, Carrie, probably the hardest thing, definitely that, when you give women a safe space to openly and frankly discuss their fears and, sometimes their darkest places and frustrations, you're going to get those. They're going to put them there. You're going to hear the fear and the sadness and the grief. And it's easy to internalize that, but I also recognize that a lot of what I'm seeing online isn't the sole facet of these women's lives. It is not their whole story. It is I have given them a place to put their darkness so they can feel more light. And I keep that in my mind all the time. And I do there are as there always are in a crowd, there are some people, because I try to be a bit of a lighthouse, and whenever you are that, you're going to have some people who just try to sort of suffocate your light. And I have had a f only a few where I've been like, I need to protect myself a little more because they just want to give, they just want you to solve that,
Mm-hmm.
things
Mm-hmm.
for them, and I'm just like,
Hmm.
I can't make you happy.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, I mean,
Yeah.
I can give you all of these tools, but that's got to come from inside, you know? And
Mhm.
that is definitely a tricky thing because I don't like cutting anyone off ever. But there are definitely some times over the course of like 4 years, you know, and a handful of times because I've got DMs coming out the wazoo, like people like throwing messages through the window and like any sort of different way. And there have been some times where I've just got to like, I have to let this go because this is an energy suck, you know, and this is somebody
Yes.
that will just pull me in.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's hard, but you
Do you
know,
get pulled, do you get pulled into uh social media wars often
no, nope,
and
nope, nope,
okay,
nope,
good.
nope, nope,
Yeah.
nope.
And
I will not waste my life arguing with people on the internet. Like, I mean, I see some of that happening once in a blue moon. I will put some thoughts out there, but generally not because you just don't change anyone's hearts and minds. Like everyone is just like out there broadcasting their own stuff and very often not listening. They just want to win the argument. And I don't, that's not a useful use of my time. And I mean, and you'll appreciate this. Like I spend my energy trying to instead of doing that, I just try to put out my own thoughts into the world so people know my point of view. And I think that's probably one of the things I think people like about the show and why we do have like this very consistent loyal audience is that I have a point of view. People know kind of what to expect from me, and
yes.
that I am
Yes.
um intentional and I'm careful. And I think that, when you talked about my emotional energy, the really one of the hardest parts is that I do take that responsibility very, very, very seriously. And as a longtime writer, I appreciate the power of every word and how words land and how they're going to land on different ears. And, I mean, like sometimes it will wake me up in the middle of the night, like considering some words. And I'll just be like, I should take those words. I should change those words. I should use those words differently. And then,
I'm laughing because yes, yes, because if you look at our Slack channel, our direct messages to each other, I know that if I wake up, so we're in different time zones. You're
yeah, I'm on
you're
the
on the
East
East,
Coast.
and I'm currently in Pacific Coast. So I know that if I wake up at 6 a.m. and I see a Slack message from Selene, that if it's just an image of her Aura Ring data, I know it's going to be a rough day for me.
With a
Like,
big white chunk in the middle of the night. Like a heart
yeah,
rate spike. Guess who
it
woke
is.
up at
Yeah,
2:30
yeah.
and was like, wait.
Changes are a coming for me because
I don't
because
like.
that that means edits will be made in
I
the
don't like how
show.
I said that. That's not gonna
Yeah.
land well. Yeah.
I, but I yeah,
Or yeah.
I do appreciate it. I have never said no. I have never said that's a waste of my time or that's not a big deal because I also know that you wouldn't do something if it wasn't a big deal. You wouldn't act on something if it wasn't a big deal.
Yeah, I
And
mean,
yeah,
I have a good barometer, for the temperature of the conversation, and I just want it's very important to me that I get things correct. No one's perfect, but I really, really that's important to me, and that it lands in the way that I intend it to land.
yeah,
Because I mean, I mean, I am not I'm not afraid of being called out, but I also just don't want to unnecessarily stir the pot. You know what I mean?
mhm.
If you spend any time, anyone on the menopause social media, boy, oh boy, there's a lot of arrows flying. And I try to
Yeah.
just duck, like
Yeah, yeah.
if I feel like I need to like put my head up and maybe take a shot, fine. But generally speaking, I'm not stirring any pots just to stir the pot. That's not my MO.
No, no, you don't want to. Your goal in life was not to become internet famous. I think
No.
your goal in life or your goal with this venture has been to be a level-headed conduit of good information.
Thank you.
You're
Yeah.
welcome. And that just dawned on me because it's not like you're on the mic proclaiming to be the expert on
I
all of this. You are bringing the experts to the show while also simultaneously sharing your personal experience.
Yep.
Not saying that that's right or wrong for anyone or everyone, but yeah, like, and so like to piggyback on that, of the arrows flying and these whew, just the do you feel like you're playing whack-a-mole, I think is what I'm trying to ask you. With there's so many myths and so much misinformation and so much like definitive
Ugh,
content out there, meaning like this is the way to go and this is what you need,
that
nothing
actually
else
bothers me
works.
more than anything. Um, I'm careful about the word misinformation. You know, I have to break them at my
Okay.
hold on. My for some reason my they disconnected again. I
Okay.
don't know why. I think I just bumped them and they
Okay.
disconnected. Speak?
Okay.
Okay, we're good. I'm sorry about
Am I
that.
going too long? Are we talking too long?
I think we're okay.
Okay.
Do you think we're
I
okay?
think I think we started like 10 minutes into it, so we're
At
good.
least. Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Okay. Um,
So let me ask that again. So look, so piggybacking
Zoom
on,
keeps
oh, is it not?
such a weird thing. Zoom keeps kicking me. Hold on.
Okay.
Plug in.
Are those wireless?
I don't know why Zoom does this once in a while. All right.
Check, 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 check.
Yep, that's fine. I don't
Okay.
know. Once in a while, Zoom wants to recognize. I have this off. Yeah, I have it off on my phone. Anyway,
Okay.
I can talk about I'll go into the misinformation thing now. But I think we're okay. Do
Okay.
you think we're okay?
Okay. I think we're fine. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I'll be able to clean up some stuff. Like I don't need to put my diet, like I don't need to put my woe is me
Yeah,
story
you
in
can
there.
whatever. You can listen to it and adjust it
Yeah,
however you want.
yeah.
Okay,
Some
cool.
of it is just me, like us, like I want to be in the moment with you, and then I can pull out the stuff
Yep.
that's like extraneous
Yeah, that's
uh
cool. That's cool.
afterwards.
Okay.
So let
All
me
right.
just reframe that question
Yeah, go
of
ahead
like,
again
okay, okay,
with the
okay. So to piggyback on that, do you just on a daily basis, Celine, feel like you're playing whack-a-mole with all of the myths and misinformation that's out there?
I mean, here's the thing. So I'm very careful about the word misinformation. I think it gets thrown around a lot, and I'm wary of it sometimes. Like, I have been a health science journalist for 30 years, more than that. I started in 1993. So, I have seen a lot. I have seen experts stand on mountaintops and scream that fat is bad and carbs are the only answer for you, only to see what happened after that. After that, I have seen, they're telling people not to eat avocados and nuts, and I'm like, really? I've seen people stand on mountaintops and say, don't ever let your knees go over your toes when you squat. Keep it like, I mean, just like stuff that, so what is misinformation sometimes turns into information, the correct information and vice versa. And so I'm really, really, really careful. I'm really careful about that. And I understand that science evolves. And that's, you and I have had this conversation a lot offline, especially about hormone therapy. Like, the guidelines are conservative by necessity, but science evolves and there becomes all these signals and a lot of practitioners. And that's, Carla and I talked about that in a recent episode where you have all these studies and all these signals showing this thing, but not quite enough to move the guidelines, but maybe enough for practitioners to look at it and be like, you're a risk woman, why don't we try this, and color a little bit outside of the lines. And that's okay. So I'm not one, like, there are people who are really heavy-handed and it's like, that's not the guidelines, boom, and I'm just like,
Yeah, yeah.
where I get more, where I feel like I do feel a bit more like I have the big rubber mallet in my hand and I just want to keep hitting the things popping up, is where you do have the absolutists who are just like, every woman needs to replace her hormones. I'm like, what
Oof.
hormones is she replacing? And like who, like, because I know women who haven't and they're doing brilliantly, right? And it just it's not respectful to her experience, and you're just discounting her whole experience. And like, are you saying that she's lying? Are you saying that that's not true? I mean, the absolutists I have a bigger problem with, honestly.
Yeah. Yeah. And I do too. I had no idea where I was going to go with that, so I'll be cutting
That's
that
okay.
part out. Yeah, yeah. I think that that's where we get all caught. I think that we as in general public, general population, or consumers of social media, I don't know that we're seeking just the one piece of information that's going to solve all of our problems, or we're told that there is one. And so we start to believe that there is one. And
I think we
I
want
don't know.
one.
I think we want
I
one.
mean, I think, and that's just a natural human nature
Yeah.
thing. And then if you have somebody, you're very vulnerable to somebody who's telling you they have the answer because you just want it.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
saw that with weight. You see that with weight all the time.
Do we ever? And
Yeah.
so then how do you recommend women sort through this barrage of information that's out there from a personal standpoint?
Yeah, I mean, I think, if somebody is telling you this is the only way, and then they're also like maybe selling a whole lot of stuff to you, think about it.
Yeah.
Just think. I mean, I'm not saying I also am not the kind of person that's like, oh, that woman's selling you supplements, so you shouldn't listen to her. I mean, I don't really prescribe to that either because I do think some supplements are useful. But I think that it's important that you know yourself. Like take stock. That should be your first action always, I think. Take stock of yourself. What is up? Like, what are you experiencing that you are not happy about? Like, what do you personally need? What is happening to you during this journey? Are you not sleeping? Do you have hot flashes? Your body composition is changing. What is happening? Write it down. Like, just, take stock. Take stock of your health, like I've said before. And then you can start wading into it. It's always helpful to, check people's credentials, make sure that they are menopause informed. Just because they have an MD behind their name doesn't always mean they're going to be giving you like the information that is necessarily accurate, but like check if they're menopause informed and then like try don't be afraid to like try something knowing that you can put it down. I think there's this all or nothing idea. It's like I'm either going to take care of hormone therapy or I'm not. I'm either going to do this or I'm not. And nothing, that's what you don't need to be so black and white about it. You can, all the lifestyle things all the time. You should try to nourish yourself well, manage your stress, exercise, lift. That stuff is your bedrock. And then
Mhm.
you can try stuff on top of that. You can try hormone therapy for a while. You can try adaptogens for a while. You can try these things. And if they are not working, you can put them down and try something else. And I just think that um, if we approach it from a very personal standpoint with a bit less urgency, then it's not as a stress-inducing process, I guess. It's just a more personal empowering process. Does that
Mhm.
make sense?
Oh, totally. And when I was editing and producing your show with Carla a couple of weeks ago, and I freaking loved that episode because there's no better personalities to chat with each other than you and Carla. I just love it. You get that East Coast vibe going on, but
Oh
like
yeah.
that's exactly what Carla said, which was like none of this is like not reversible. Like try it. And if it doesn't work,
We can
stop
stop.
it. Like you can
She's like,
stop.
guess what? We can stop. And it's
Yeah,
just,
yeah,
yeah. I mean,
yeah,
I like her because that's all she does is hormones. So she doesn't put them on these pedestals. She just like
yeah,
views them as they are.
yeah.
And I also like I think it's really important to say very loud and clear when you're talking about like how to sort through all of this is that and I think you have talked about this with me a little bit where you might be fine, but if you're looking around the room and somebody isn't fine, you're like, oh, maybe that's going to happen to me too, or maybe I should worry about that too. Like, don't buy yourself trouble. Like, if what you're doing is working for you, and this like includes all the advice I give you, like I do think that women should lift heavy, and I'm going to tell you to lift heavy no matter what. But like you don't need to change up everything if what you're doing is working. If what you're doing is not longer serving you, then yes, then consider like, oh, maybe I should change my training because my physiology is training XYZ.
Mhm.
But the people who sometimes are like, "Oh, I changed everything because I saw that this is what we're supposed to do now." I was like, "Oh, okay,
Oh
wait.
yeah.
Like, did you, were you, how were you doing before?" Like, and they're like,
Yeah.
"Oh, it was great." I'm like, "Okay, like, let's rewind. Like, maybe, like, yes, you should add in the weights because, yes, you do need muscle and it's going to be harder and blah, blah, blah. But you don't need to, like, throw everything out and start over if, like, what you're doing is successful for you. Trust, I think we lose trust in ourselves and we don't need to lose trust in ourselves.
Oh, that's so well said. Thank you for that. Because guilty is charged on all of that. Starting to go down this mindset of like, well, I guess have to give up marathon running because, I've been told I just
I
have
know
to
you
do
just keep
like,
hearing it.
you just keep hearing it. It's just not true. It's not true. It's not true. You've got to take personal inventory and personal stock and how are
Totally.
you feeling?
And
And
some women do struggle more with it. That's legit too. Do you know what I mean? Like there are women who do struggle more with the long endurance volume stuff.
Mhm.
They just can't get on top of it. And then okay, like we can try to like help and finagle, but if you actually feel better not doing that, that's okay too.
Yeah. I want to round this plane or no, I want to round up this episode by asking you a couple of just kind of fun questions.
Sure.
Uh, Silver ball questions, like what's that thing called? Is it a silver ball that a genie or that like a
Crystal ball.
Chris? Okay.
Welcome to perimenopause.
I'm leaving that one
Where
in
we play
there.
charades.
I am leaving that
It sounds like
Which, by the way, if you're not subscribed yet to the Feisty 40 Plus newsletter, cry it out loud, do it. I also have the joy of editing that newsletter every week. And I have learned so much just from the science that you have put forth, including the whole article and the whole diatribe about how women in this time of life play charades with each other because we
yeah,
can't find the
word
words.
recall is a thing.
Yes, we can't find the words.
Those
So,
parts of our brain are
crystal
temporarily
ball.
disconnected. They'll come back. Anyway, go ahead.
so is so so let me preface this next question by so if you can remember, Celine,
Yeah.
is there a guest or topic that has impacted you so greatly and maybe changed the way you see the world or do things?
You know, um, I I do make it a mission to learn something from every single episode. Like that's important to me because if I learn something, you're gonna learn something. So
Mhm.
I take something from every single episode, but the ones that bang around my head and stay with me the longest have honestly been the historical cultural ones, like All in Her Head by Elizabeth Coman, Dr. Coman, and Unwell Women by Eleanor Cleghorn were two that I was like, man, you think you know how shitty the medical system has been to women until you read those books and you're like, oh, okay, that's why we're in 2024 and we are still here in the dark about all this stuff. Like mind-blowing stuff that they bring to light about oh
Oh, yeah. I have not read Unwell Women, but I did read All in Her Head
so
by
good.
Dr. Elizabeth Coman. It's so good. It is so maddening. I
Maddening.
recommend it for not only anyone, but my niece was in medical school at the time, and I sent her a copy, and I was like, "Look, I know, like you're just being sent through the ringer, the medical school ringer right now." And I just want you to read this just to get some historical perspective. And
Because
I don't
it's
know if that
still
was the right thing to
important.
do, but yeah, it was
You
so
know, it
important to
is. It's
know.
still important. I mean, when I had, that one too, Dr. Martha Gulati, who's the Preventative Cardiology Association president. I can't remember the name of the association exactly, but I mean, the first words out of that mouth was the only thing women do better in heart disease is die. And like, and she was just like, they get less ambulance rides, less medicine, less tertiary care, less at like all of it, and that's real. And that is happening now still because of the historical context of all of this, not understanding that women are different, and we need our own research. And we're finally like that message is just finally getting through just now.
Yeah. And not only are we different, that we're actually whole humans because the
Yes, we're not just
historical,
uteruses in a vessel.
yes. And that was one of the things that blew me away reading Dr. Coleman's book, All in Her Head, was that for so long, for millennia, women really weren't even treated as human beings
Yeah.
and a whole person. And so, oh gosh, yes, I highly recommend it. Don't read it before you go to bed because you'll go to bed angry.
Yeah, you don't want your
Yeah,
stress response up that
it's
high.
it's not a beach read. Quite honestly, I don't know when a good time to read it is. But menopause seems to be a good time of life to read it. If you're gonna be angry, be angry. Do you have any dream guests that you would
Hmm.
love to have on
That's a good
besides
question.
Oprah? I don't know.
That would be very interesting. No, there's some well-known names that I'd love to talk to, are a little hard to reach now because they've become in such high demand. Like Lisa Mosconi comes to mind, who's done all that brain research. Um, it would be super fun to talk to someone. I know Linda Rowan, a woman who works with us, would love me to talk to Mel Robbins, and Mel Robbins is super fun. But um, as a Gen Xer, a very card carrying Gen Xer, I would freaking love to talk to Alanis Morissette.
Oh.
That would be my.
Oh.
She wore a perimenopause. It said perimenopause t-shirt during her concert tour this past summer. She didn't wear it the night I saw her, but my God, like what an incredible show. Like I think she's 50 now. She's been very open about how hard it is to like breastfeed while she's in perimenopause because she's got young kids still, and uh she was such a big part of my 20s and just spoke to me so hard. Like tears were like streaming down my face during that concert, and I could tear up right now thinking about it. And I just love her, and I would like, yes, that would be, if I had a dream guest, that would be.
I got to see her in August as well, on this most recent tour. She came through a couple of summers ago and I missed it. I was being silly and frugal and tickets were really expensive and I was like, "Oh, it's no big deal." And I think it may have even been the anniversary of Jagged Little Pill and I regretted not going to that concert so much. So I said, I will never miss another opportunity to see her. So she came through Portland over the summer and drove up to Portland to see her. She was on tour with Morgan Wade and Joan freaking Jett.
That's who I saw her with.
I, same. I had the same visceral response, Celine. I didn't expect it, but I was just like vibing with so much energy after that show. Top five of all
Yeah.
shows that
She
I've ever seen for
she
sure.
started she opened with Hand in Her Pocket, A Hand in Your
Mhm.
Pocket, which is my
Mhm.
favorite. And I literally just started crying. I was like, that song just like spoke to me so my 20 something. I'm just like singing. So yeah. I was like, oh, it's gonna be that kind of a night. What a great
And it
show. Wow.
was,
Her
yeah.
voice, man.
Yes, on point. And I think it's because her voice is so unique, just her intonations and the
Yeah,
way she sings, so unique. And I didn't expect it to be that powerful in person. And it was more so.
I
And
agree.
the way she was dancing and spinning around and like just like bobbing her head with her
Joyful Rage.
crazy, yes,
I was like,
yes.
yes, this is my vibe. I am.
And and then she
Burn
would,
it down while you dance. Here we go.
but also like from a Zen Buddhist perspective because
Yes.
she has that.
Yes. Thank you,
Yeah.
India. She closed with thank you, India. And I was just like, oh.
I mean, it was, yeah. Okay, so that's our plug to go see Alanis Morissette if you ever get the chance. And I am a proud Gen Xer as well, firmly in the Gen X camp. But yeah, great suggestion. I didn't see that one coming. Didn't see that one coming. Um, Final thing,
Yep.
takeaways, practical
Okay.
takeaways from the
Yep.
show that
Yep.
you have had. And again, maybe we can do a poll on our social media channels for the show on the Menopause channels because I want to know what people's takeaways have been.
Yeah. No, I'd be really
And
interested.
I would be
Super
really
interested.
interested in
Like what
seeing
they've
that.
gotten out of the past couple of years.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, because
Four
I
years.
think I think people, aside from the valuable information and education that they're getting, I do think people have an empowered experience when they listen to this show.
Yeah, no, I mean
It's
I
a
hear
very
that, and I'll
empowering show.
yeah, and I'll hear I will say like that my number one because this just came up this weekend. We had Unpaved, which is a central PA gravel event my husband puts on that I help out with. Um, there was a woman that came up to him who's very disappointed that she didn't get to meet me because she's a listener of the show, and she said that she started listening and she was already through menopause and she wished she had listened earlier and blah blah blah, but she said I kept talking about lifting heavy and this importance of lifting heavy and knowing your bones, and she got a DEXA scan and she's like, I had osteoporosis, I would have never ever known that. And I'm like, I must lift heavy shit. And she started taking care of herself and lifting heavy shit, and now she does not have osteoporosis. And that is everything. Like, I bang that drum all the time because it has been accepted in this society that women will grow frail. We accept it. We have words like dowager's hump, right? Like, oh, this is just how women just get stooped over and they just break their hips, and this has to change. Like, we live a very long time post menopause and we need to keep our skeleton strong. So I am just like, that is one of my biggest, along with lifting heavy, is like know your bone health, know your bone health.
Yeah. Yeah. And are DEXA scans, do you know if they're readily available in most cities
They
or,
are. I
or
mean, you
yeah.
can Google DEXA scan near me and probably
Okay.
find something. Some fitness facilities, that are affiliated with universities, where like they're pretty ubiquitous. Whether or not your insurance will pay for it is
Right.
another thing,
Right.
because that's always been 65, which is insane.
Yeah. 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 And which, yeah, that is insane because 65 is,
The horse is
it's,
around the globe. It's not
yeah,
just
I
out of
was
the
like,
barn. It's
yeah,
just
exactly.
yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. My mother-in-law, who's like 83, she's very frail. Just very much grew up in the eating like a bird generation
Yep.
and just very petite and
And then you get bones like a bird,
uh,
except you have no wings, so you're not flying.
no,
So let's
no,
let's not do that. Yeah.
no. And I'm sick of her saying to me, I love her. I love her. We get along great. But she just like her go-to phrase to me is you just wait till my age. And
Oh,
and
I've heard
and
that
I
my whole
and I'm
life.
just like,
I've
well,
heard that all my life. You
I know.
wait
And I'm
until
like,
you're 35. I'm like, okay. You wait
you
until you're
wait,
40. You just
you
wait
wait.
until you're 50.
Yep.
Like, okay,
Still at it.
I'm
Still
here.
at it.
I know.
Still here. Yeah, and you've beat the drum also on importance of muscle and strength training.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Keeping
That
track of your
one,
symptoms, keeping track of, like, taking stock is another thing I say an awful lot because I think that's
yeah.
important.
I think definitely I've heard the message. I've heard it. Lift heavy shit. Like got it in the brain. And I think I struggle along with a lot of other listeners of like what to do and then how to fit it in with everything. And so and even just like periodizing it with
Hmm.
all the other things in my life. So
Yeah.
yeah, if I am in a training cycle for a triathlon, I back off on the lifting heavy shit. And now that I'm kind of going into the off season, if you will, like now is the time. And so I do struggle with that, trying to figure out the best thing to do. Um,
I
is it
get that. I
CrossFit?
mean,
Is it this? It's
that's such a
common.
trial. It is such a trial and error thing. And it helps to work with somebody too. I mean, I used to really just concentrate on that sort of off season, maybe half the year. But I have found that I lose power if I don't pepper
Mm,
it in throughout the entire year. So
mm,
I kind of keep it in throughout. If I have something very big coming up, maybe that week I won't, or maybe I'll do just a few lifts because I find if I just do a couple of heavy lifts, it actually potentiates me. I actually feel even
mm,
better on my
mm.
bike, like all the muscles are awake and ready to go and activated. So there's it's a process I think everybody sort of has to figure out for themselves, like any kind of training, it becomes a personal thing.
Yeah. Yeah. One of my biggest takeaways, similar to you saying take stock, take stock, take stock, but one of my biggest takeaways that I've learned is really to keep better track of what is happening to me and when and with what frequency. So I really am logging now my cycles. I
Mm,
am logging the symptoms that I have with each cycle because each month or 6 weeks or 8 weeks or however long, I'm definitely in the wires are getting crossed phase of my menstrual cycle. I am just trying to note both physically and physiologically what I'm feeling to notice a progression, to notice,
yeah,
oh, and so that's something I just never considered in my early to mid 40s. It was just like,
totally.
yeah, 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 whatever. I'm menstruating, great. So that's something that has been a huge takeaway because it helps, it's empowering, and I have self-agency over that. So
Yeah,
when I do go speak to my doctor, I'm not just saying, well, I feel like crap all the time, when that's might not
totally.
be true. Like I'm saying, I can hand them,
That is a very good point.
yes. So
Yes.
do that. Like that has been a huge takeaway for me.
Yeah. No, I think that's important.
Hmm. Another one, and we're just riffing now, that I have taken away. You mentioned it earlier, and it's very, very important. Is for me, I have to put blinders on. So I've had to silence some people on the socials.
Hmm.
I've had to step away from the Facebook group at times. It is so easy for me to get caught up in whatever everyone else is doing or what they're feeling. And that's what has led to the most anxiety that I've
Hmm.
had. So when people talk about anxiety as a menopause symptom, I'm like, I don't even know if that's a symptom of mine or if I'm self-perpetuating it by by like getting caught up in other people's situations and other
Right.
people's stresses. So I am a takeaway for me is just like it is really putting blinders on to a lot of other messages out there and really only going to trusted sources, you being one of them.
Yeah, you told me one time, like, when you couldn't sleep, you were like scanning the group's messages. I'm like, don't do that.
Yes,
That's
yes,
not gonna put you to
yes.
sleep.
Yes. Yeah, I think it may have been a day where I got your Aura Ring screenshot and I'm like, well, you think your sleep data was bad. Like I was just reading the Hit Play Up on Facebook group.
3 in the morning.
Yeah, yeah. Like so yeah, you're stressed, but I'm dying. So no, no. What other takeaways would you say?
Yeah, I mean, just like appreciate the now, appreciate what you can do, make goals, find things that excite you and make goals and don't let go of that part. I mean, there's so many. I really, really want to learn to surf, and there's all kinds of stuff that you can take inspiration from too, instead of like taking others' anxiety, take inspiration, like I think that's a really important message for this time of life.
Caroline Paul's book had a
Yep.
profound impact on me
Yeah.
as well. Yeah, this summer, I love gravel biking and mountain biking anyways, but like this was the first year I actually planted a garden
Mm.
and it succeeded. Like
Oh,
I
that's
just
awesome.
ate kale from my garden last
That's
night for
so cool.
dinner.
I love
Yeah,
that.
and I made salads with cucumbers and tomatoes from my garden, and that was like that was like standing on a podium for me.
That's cool.
It
No, that
really
is very
was.
cool.
It really was. And just learning how to cook in general. I do enjoy cooking. I do enjoy learning new ways to make food and to make different meals. And so I've really embraced that side of things in my life as well. So I appreciate when you say just like explore
Totally.
other things that you've always wanted to do. And communication is another takeaway that I have taken from the show. So talking to your partner and
Hmm.
my poor husband Sean gets he gets an earful because, well, he knows you, he knows all the Feisty team,
Yep.
he knows that we are like on the front lines of all of our missions, and so I love that I can communicate with him when I am having like an off moment, or if I don't feel well, like because I will go 2 months without having a period, and then all of a sudden it's like a murder scene. I'm like, what is happening? So sometimes when I'm just in a mood, I'll just say, "Well, Sean, I'm another year away from menopause," because
Oh
like I
yeah.
know if I start my
Way
period,
to put it.
I'm 12 months away. I'm like, well, I'm at least another year away from menopause.
Yep.
Want to have a baby? No, I'm just kidding. So yeah, those are some of my biggest takeaways. Is there any
Yeah, I mean, I would
takeaway?
just say I'd like to. I mean, definitely, I always want to leave people with the show, and anything I do is never intended to make anyone feel dread or fear or afraid, or doomed, like all that stuff. That's the opposite of my intent and my mission here. My mission here is always to inform and shed light and give information and education, so you know what's going on if you should experience it, which you know not necessarily will, and then you know that the steps you can take to feel like yourself and feel good again, and continue to do the things you love. And our bodies will change. I mean, that's a given. Menopause intersects with a time in our life where we're all getting older, and you're not going to be the same at 50 that you were at 40, or 60 at 50, or 70 at 60. Those are truisms. And we also don't necessarily know what we're going to look like at any of those things, because we're the first generation of women who are talking about these things and being active about them and taking care of ourselves the way that we are in exercising and all of this. So, you could also need to put down your preconceived notions about what all that looks like, and I do think just being present and not living with any kind of dread, and feeling that you have agency and you're in an empowered community is really what I want to leave people with for the next 200 episodes.
Yeah. Thanks for bringing me along for the ride.
Well, thanks for being my trusted, 6 a.m. Here's my aura ring. This is what I'm thinking.
Yeah, I feel very much like the Robin to your Batman.
At least not Thelma to Louise. We're not
Yeah.
driving this car off
Yeah.
off a
Yeah.
cliff.
No, no, no. Well, congratulations to you. Thank you for all that you're doing in this space for all of us. And I cannot wait to see truly what the next year, 2, 3, 4 years have in store for not just you and the show, but this
Yeah,
movement in general, the menopause movement in general.
it's
I
just
love
getting started in so many
just getting
ways.
started. Yeah, it's just getting started. So cheers to 200. Cheers to
Cheers.
3 million downloads.
Thanks all. Thanks for coming along. We wouldn't be here without you. Well, that's our show. Come on back next week when I sit down with Dr. Jewel Kling and Christy Napolitano-Werneau for an important conversation about premature menopause and primary ovarian insufficiency, or POI. So come on back for that one. It's an important conversation. And until then, as always, stay feisty. You've been listening to Hit Play, Not Pause, a feisty menopause podcast for active, performance-minded women. I'm your host, Selene Yeager. The show is edited and produced by the strong, talented, and amazing women at Live Feisty Media. Follow us on social media at Feisty Menopause, and please help us spread the word. Screenshot and share this episode on your social media channels with the tag @FeistyMenopause. Share the show with your friends, and please subscribe, like, review, and rate this show wherever you get your podcasts. Word of mouth and good reviews make it easier for other listeners to find. Thanks for listening, and as always, stay feisty.